I didn't think the whole Steven Crowder versus Ben Shapiro dispute was that important or worth commenting on, but Tim Pool pointed this out, and I think it's accurate.
This is an important story. A lot of people have asked me, why does this matter? It's drama between media companies. And I think the questions being asked right now could determine the shape of independent, alternative, anti-establishment, and corporate media in general moving forward. Is it going to more take the shape of the traditional Hollywood system, but with better views? Or is it going to be a new system that makes sure the individuals are empowered and can maintain themselves through the issues of censorship and run their own companies after any contracts change? There's a lot of questions here, more than just that.
So let me start off by commenting on the personalities involved. I do not like particularly Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro. I think they're both unserious in that they don't engage with actual intellectual opposition. They just like to dunk on college kids during a Change My Mind segment or a TPUSA conference.
You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout. In the name Boy Scouts.
And I'm also just generally skeptical of people who self-describe themselves as partisans, whether it's conservative or liberal, because that just renders them ineffective and it lowers their credibility in the eyes of most people in the center or people who are on the opposite side of the aisle. For example, if Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro try to provide a rational explanation for why people would want to vote for Donald Trump, even if it's a good explanation, the fact that it's them, self-described partisans, making that argument will turn a lot of people off and say, I don't care what these people have to say, or I don't care about your argument. Whereas if you compare that to someone like Dave Chappelle, who is much more, I would say, centrist in that he goes after both the right and the left. When he goes on SNL and makes a very subtle but very poignant argument or rationalization explaining why Trump voters chose to support Trump, I think it has much more cultural power and influence behind it because he's not a self-described partisan. And that, in turn, influences more people, and certainly more people in the space of politics, because I do think politics is downstream of culture. But I have to say, after this whole dispute between Crowder and the Daily Wire, I actually have a lot more respect for Crowder. My mind has been changed, you could say. My initial intuition, without looking much into the story, was that Crowder was just grifting and doing this for attention, because my interpretation of him as a comedian is that's exactly what he would do. But after watching his interview with Tim Pool, I felt he carried himself with a level of competence that was honestly admirable.
You hear that we're fighting back against big tech, and you see this offer, and you go, oh, there's no future here. And the response to this is not right has always been money, 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 money. I can't stress it enough. So it's not about the money.
So what is the future in your mind then? What needs to be done?
What first needs to be done is people to mean what they say. And if you are taking money from conservatives out there, under the guise that you're fighting big tech, start fighting big tech. Start with that.
Crowder's point is that conservative media should not be basing its business model on whether or not its media figures are playing in the boundaries that big tech corporations set. And I agree with him. I think it's good that companies like the Daily Wire exist and prove that there is a market for non-woke products and services. And I understand that when you're manufacturing physical products like with Jeremy's razors, and you need expensive raw materials and warehouses and all of that, you have to secure large amounts of capital funds from mainstream investors, and so you need to play within the boundaries more so than you would if you were just a media company. But my primary worry here, and it's related to Tim Pool's original point about the future of independent media, is that I think companies like the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro and people even like Jordan Peterson have fallen into a trap of sorts, which is that because they recognize the positive sides of capitalism and the necessity of having to run a sustainable institution in order to further your goals, they don't necessarily see how the running things like a business attitude and style can actually erode their credibility. Like with Jordan Peterson, he used to be just a professor lecturing in a classroom and just providing the information as is. But then more recently, he's taken a very high production, corporatized approach, which certainly enables new opportunities, but I do think it limits his appeal to people who are not already sympathetic to him.
I've said right from the beginning that I'm an evil capitalist. I don't make any bones about it. I'm not ashamed of making money. It's very hard to make money.
I do think there's something intuitively off-putting about that approach. And the reason I think that is because that's how I felt watching Crowder take this more principled stand and say, no, it's not about the money. It's not about business. And of course, he could be lying, but I watched the whole back and forth, and I do tend to actually agree with him. And this is from someone who came into this whole thing with a negative perspective of Crowder. And so I think it's important for both entities and approaches to exist in order to create a parallel society of sorts that is immune to the coordinated censorship campaigns of many ideologically captured institutions. And I think the infighting on the right is important because there is genuine disagreement that needs to be hashed out. And I would have more respect for certain people on the right and certain people on the left if they spent more time going after their own side and attempting to find common ground with the other. But I am a spineless centrist, of course. So anyway, in the meantime, good luck and Godspeed.